Okay, so I am recording this about an hour, little less, after they dropped the Dev Diary and the Baltic Battalion Specialization. This is probably gonna go up on Wednesday. It's Monday right now as I'm at time recording, and I'm gonna look through this. However, before I do, I feel like an idiot. And to explain why, I'm going to go down here to this, the unit list reveal. And I'm going to point out something that my galactically blind self missed. Actually, I might end up going down a few more of these. Because if I can find a specific picture that they released on the developer blog, or not the developer blog, the Patreon, then no. Okay, maybe it's over here? Yes, I know, go away. Because there was a specific picture that I saw on the Patreon. And again, that's only like $1, so. I don't see it here, and I don't really want to go to the Patreon to show it, because I don't know if there's going to create any issues. But it showed a picture of the Vilcus, which is the IFV on the Boxer chassis. Specifically, it's this version of the Vilcus over here, or a better example would be this one over here. And you had these bulges along the side. They were better to see in the picture that I'm talking about, the one on the Patreon. And I initially thought this was side mount, this was ERA you could put on the side. I am a complete idiot, okay? Because you see these distinct cuts in the side panels? That's not ERA. That's a German active protection system. I saw this yesterday, Sunday, the 15th, which is yesterday at the time of recording, as I was browsing through the pictures. And I completely failed to see that the first time, which is incredibly annoying. I forget the name of the specific system, but that's a German active protection system. Usually when it comes to active protection systems in the game, currently there's only two on the US side. There is Iron Fist, which is what the CV9035 over here has, and then there's Trophy, which is what this Leopard has, if I'm not mistaken. They're both Israeli systems, and then for Russia you have Arena. I think you technically have 3, because I think you have Droizhd on, hang on, where is Guards? Where's the T-80U? There's the T-80U. Because you have Droizhd on the T-80U, which is actually the first operational active protection system, period. The first operational active protection system anywhere. It only covered like the frontal 60-degree arc of the turret, but considering that it was either this or nothing, it's still kind of impressive. The Soviets apparently used it in Afghanistan. I found out that it was very limited. Again, it only covered about a 60-degree arc in front of the turret. It couldn't really do anything if you were firing at the tank from above, and there was a lot of other issues. But if memory serves, I believe one of the issues was that, given the way that it worked, if you fired one, because basically the way it works, if memory serves, is each one of these boxes contains a rocket, and the rocket is set with a fuse that detonates in kind of like a proximity blast fragmentation fuse on a surface-to-air missile or air-to-air missile to try to shoot down a plane. It does the same basic thing, but on a smaller scale against the incoming ATGM. Problem: you're detonating a high-velocity cloud of explosive or of shrapnel and fragments. Yeah, you could occasionally have the bad habit of shredding your infantry that was in front of the tank. So, now to be fair, that's a problem that a lot of active protection systems deal with. Some more than others, but that's still a problem that they discovered with Droizd, I believe it's pronounced. And then you have Arena, like on the T90 here, and the T72. If I'm going to be entirely honest, I do not know how this works. I'm not entirely sure how this works. And then the T15 or the T14, I believe, has a different type of APS that isn't Arena, but I don't know exactly what type it is. Do these have a named APS? Okay, so you've got Afghanet. That's called Afghanet. Where's the B? No, that's coastal troops. Where's the K-16? There's the K-16. That's also Afghanet. That might actually be what the T-14 has. I can't remember. I suspect this also has at least the same basic type. Also, it appears the APS only covers the frontal arc instead of 360. Which, I mean, to be fair, they've made a lot of simplifying. I hesitate to use the word assumptions, but they've made a lot of simplifying. What's the word I'm looking for? They've made things a lot simpler. I don't want to use the word assumptions, but then again, at the same time, the only other word I could think of would be contrivances, and that it doesn't sound anywhere near as and that doesn't sound very flattering. But they've made a lot of simplifying shortcuts. Shortcuts would probably be the best term for all of this. Anyway, I digress. I bring that up because I'm a blind idiot. And I wanted to point that out. Anyway, Baltic Battalion Army Specialization. We get all the units. Located in Europe's far northeastern edge, 3 Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, are bordered by mainland Russia to the east. Over here, you can see the dividing line between Russia and Belarus right here. Belarus to the south, and a Russian exclave of Kaliningrad to the west. This geography leaves them connected with their NATO allies only through a narrow corridor with Poland known as the Suwalki Gap. This, if memory serves, is actually the first canonical mention of NATO anywhere regarding this game. I don't think NATO is mentioned directly in the entire campaign. So, I mean, I could be wrong. It's been months since I played it, and it's been months since I've seen the cutscenes, but I don't think NATO was mentioned anywhere in the entire campaign. I wonder if that's Gotland. That island right there. Although I do know that with Sweden and Finland's entry into NATO, they basically turned the entire Baltic Sea into essentially a giant NATO lake, because you have the 3 Baltic states, Finland, Sweden, Poland, and Denmark, and the only other coastline on the entire Baltic Sea is owned by Russia, either through Russia proper or Kaliningrad. A critical lifeline in the event of conflict with Russia, this strategic position forms the backdrop of the Broken Arrow campaign war in the Baltic. So, The Baltic Battalion is a new specialization that can be combined with any existing U.S. specialization to create the game's first coalition battle group. As additional nations are introduced in future updates, even more coalition combinations will become possible. This is something very interesting to me, because I remember having a discussion. With someone on one of my my YouTube videos. I think it was the video where I initially look over. Hang on, I'll just find it. Okay, here we go. I remember having this conversation with this fella, and I mentioned somewhere in here that one thing that I think would be interesting is whether or not we will get the opportunity to make decks with specializations from different NATO countries. For example, a deck with the Baltic Battalion, ideally in a Baltic States nation, because I still want them to make different nations for different things, instead of lumping Europe under a single EU nation. I remember having a discussion with someone on the Discord about that, and we didn't exactly see eye to eye, but actually I've had a couple of discussions on the Discord, and the idea is met with various degrees of dismissal. And a British Armor Brigade specialization, or a deck with airborne infantry and a German light infantry specialization. If you extended this to allied but non-NATO countries, you could have something like a deck with SOCOM and a Ukrainian infantry specialization. So, anyway, and the reason why I bring that up, and I don't want to toot my own horn here. In fact, I hate when people do that kind of thing, is if they're going to do something like that, as they're going to allow us to make coalition decks, I think that's going to be very, very interesting. And I have a nagging suspicion that this Russian allied spec that they talked about when they released the roadmap, I have a nagging suspicion that that it's probably going to be China. I mean, I think the new nation is going to be China. But one thing I kind of see them doing, and I could be wrong, one thing I kind of see them doing is taking... Okay, there's two things that I can see them doing with the Russian allied spec. The first is that it's basically China. They take the Chinese spec, they put it in the game a couple of months before they actually release the Chinese nation, and then use that as a sort of teaser. The idea is that China might have 4 or 5 nations, or not nations, specs from the start, and then you have this, which could be as a DLC spec that you could buy into to maybe increase the total number of Chinese specs to 6, or the total number by 1, more accurately, as a DLC specialization. Alternatively, and to be fair, I literally just thought of this like 60 seconds ago, it could be Belarus. Belarus. I don't know. Although, if it is Belarus, I'm just gonna call it Belarus. If it is Belarus, I'm not entirely sure exactly what that would add, because I can't think of any equipment that Belarus uses that Russia doesn't already use. In fact, I'm pretty sure the equipment that they use is just like older Russian equipment. Like, hang on, where is mech? Where's the T-72B? The T-72B1. Okay. This is the oldest and probably arguably the worst Russian tank you get. It's kind of a wash between this and the T-80BV. The T-80BV is more expensive. And has worse armor. Actually, it's more expensive and it has worse armor. but it's slightly faster from the looks of it. Actually, it's a whole lot faster. But that's the only saving grace from it. You know, they could probably knock the price of the T80BV down to like 140 points. Anyway, I digress. The point is that this is arguably the worst Russian tank that you can get. Yes, I know the PT-76 exists. I'm talking about MBT. The Belarusians have the T-72B. Not the B1. The T-72B. So, like, this thing. With the ATGM. Apparently it's the B1 without the missile and then the B. Okay. Huh. Interesting. So, like this. I'm not saying that's the best tank they have, but from my understanding of the Belarusian tank fleet, which admittedly goes back to a Perun video I watched several months ago, this is their most common type of tank. So if they do decide to go with Belarus, and it could be interesting, to be entirely honest, if they went with Belarus, maybe you could do it as like the spam specialization, where all the units are cheap, but you get a lot of them. Which, if I'm going to be entirely honest, I kind of wish they actually made a Russian specialization. Long before the game came out, and they actually, this is before they revealed the Striker Cav specialization, I was assuming that you already had the 3 specs known for each country. Armor Brigade, Marine Corps, and Airborne Infantry for the US, and Guards Tank Battalion, VDV, and Coastal Troops for Russia. Well, I kind of figured that the 4th and 5th specializations for the US and Russia, for the US, they were going to be a support-focused specialization, and then a special forces focused specialization. Then again, SOCOM was a bit of an open secret for a while, so I'm not really gonna call that one because I can't. SOCOM was a bit of an open secret. Before the Airborne Infantry specialization came out, I had originally pegged Airborne Infantry to be air mobile, which, to be fair, I thought was going to combine a lot of basically between the air. Basically, I thought it was going to be what I was thinking is basically a combination of Airborne Infantry and Striker Cav. So, I mean, and then you'd have a support specialization, and I kind of got them right, because they mentioned a long, like in one of these early posts, they mentioned that some concepts totally disappeared, like US support. Others were transformed, like Air Mobile, which was originally mixed between Airborne and Striker. I realize me saying that I had those ideas could very easily be accused of just me saying that I had those ideas in retrospect to make myself seem more intelligent or whatnot, but that's what I would have guessed. And then I figured you were going to have a naval infantry specialization, a Mostostrelki, if I pronounced that right, specialization based off of, and the reason why I say that mainly is because of this old thing. And then I was hoping you could have something like a special projects specialization as a kind of like a counterpart to SOCOM, where you would have things like the Uran 9, maybe the SU-75, the PAK, the PAKDA, or the Pulsonic, Pulsonic. That's it. The Pulsonic / Envoy, and that specialization is kind of like a counterpart to SOCOM. That didn't happen, unfortunately. Another idea I was kind of toying with, and I mentioned, and I mentioned this, and I go off on this long tangent because I think this might be relevant if they do decide to give us a Belarus specialization, is another idea I had was a sort of reserve forces. Now, to be fair, this would include things like the BMD-1, the BMP-1, and a lot of old equipment, things like the Cub, or the Cub surface-to-air missile system. So basically, think like a slightly, hang on. So basically, think like a slightly suckier book with only 3 missiles. And then you have the Krug, which the missiles on that thing looked really weird. As your primary air defenses, and you might even get things like the ZSU-57-2, which I believe I mentioned in a previous video speculating about a new Russian specialization. And you could do that, and that might be the way, or they could have potentially done that, is what I thought. And that might be what they're going to do with the Belarusian specialization, if that's what the Russian Allied spec is. However, if I'm going to be entirely honest, I have no idea. Like, the Baltic Battalion, to be entirely honest, was a bit obvious, because the bones of everything was there. The bones are all there, and I know I've seen people whine and cry about, well, I say whine and cry, whine about having Baltic states units added to the game as a new specialization, just saying, oh, they're just taking the campaign units and throwing them into a new specialization. Firstly, I think that's a rather disingenuous view of it, because as we're going to see later, just go away. As you're going to see later, they actually have new cover images for a lot of them. So, but the bones were there. So, it's kind of obvious that would be the first spec. Anyway, I have gotten way off topic. Yay, I spent the first 20 odd minutes of this video completely off topic. Anyway. Baltic Battalion is a new army specialization that can be combined to create a game. Okay, yeah, I covered that. With very limited air power. Hang on just a second. Let me remove that because I don't need it anymore. With very limited air power, the Baltic states compensates by fielding a strong mix of motorized and mechanized troops equipped with European-made vehicles and weapons. This provides a wide variety of tactical options, though most units are available only in limited numbers. So I wonder if that only means we're going to get like 2 or 3 of each. Compared to the US or Russian specializations, the Baltic Battalion offers a broader selection of infantry, as each role is represented by a variant from each of the 3 countries. Which, now, to go back to the number, I wonder if that means we're only going to get 2 or 3 of each. If that's the case, that might be a bit of an issue with when it comes to deck building, because you can only select a maximum of 7 things in a certain tab, either up to the number of things in that tab, or 7 in total. Like, for example, if I were to make a Striker Cav SOCOM deck, the number of things you could put in the vehicle tab is 4, because you have 4 vehicles. You only have 4 vehicles available to you: the Booker, the MGS, the Striker AT, the Striker ATGMV, and the battleship. And this, again, would basically go with things like, for example, SOCOM Airborne, because you only have 3 vehicles. So, with a maximum limit of 7, unless the infantry is really good and subsequently expensive, or the units in question are really good and subsequently expensive, if you have to cram more units into a deck, that might be a bit of an issue when it comes to deck building, because you just might not have enough slots in each tab, is the point I'm trying to get at. Anyway, we have this picture all over again, which is still lovely. Why can't I click that? Okay, some of these you can, but... Is that just this being weird? Because I thought you could... Okay, I guess not. Huh. Anyway, reconnaissance. So we have the Scimitar. Yak. Again, with cage armor. 30mm Rarden. Small armored reconnaissance vehicle, part of the CVRT family, purchased by Latvia from the UK. Is fast and equipped with 30mm Rarden, manually loaded using 3-round clips. While this weapon does not match the rate of fire of Bushmaster chain guns, it still delivers considerable firepower, particularly at short range. Now, I did do some looking, and the Rarden does have an APDS round. I have previously mentioned that... No, that's not the right button. Anyway, I have previously mentioned that if you look at the autocannon, particularly the penetration values for things like the Russian 2A42 and the 2A72 compared to something like the Bushmaster, you'll notice that the 30mm 2A42 and 2A72, which I'd like to point out, fires around that's 20% bigger in diameter than the Bushmaster, has a smaller rate of fire, or not smaller rate of fire, but has less penetration than a Bushmaster. And the reason why I speculated, at least back then, was that because the Bushmaster is firing a saboed AP round. The Russians, now I believe I stated earlier, or in previous videos, that the Russians never developed a saboed AP round for the 30mm autocannon. I did a bit more research. Apparently they did, or at least an APDS round, which are discarding sabot. Which seems to be what this is using, because it just says APD and then trails off. Now, if you were using something like a kind of like this, you're talking about APFSDS, armor piercing, fin stabilized, and then discarding sabot. This is just presumably APDS, or armor piercing discarding sabot, which I believe is the round that the Russians developed as well. However, I can't find any penetration figures for the round in question, or for the Bushmaster round. The penetration figures for the Russian round I found were kind of consistent with what's in the game, and it was about, if memory serves, it was about 50 meters at range, or not 50 meters. It was about 50 millimeters at range. It was between 50 to 60. So, if you wanted to, I suppose you can argue buffing this, but I'm not entirely sure it's completely warranted. Anyway, I went off on a tangent again, didn't I? Well, the Rarden, I did look, and the Rarden does use an APFSDS round, or some sort of discarding sabot round. Now, the way discarding sabot works is that you have a subcaliber projectile that like, okay, so let's say you have, alright, let's take the M829A4, where's the 73? There's step 3. Let's take the M829A4. The APFSDS, basically what you're doing is you're firing a giant metal dart. Okay, and I don't want to go too deep in this because this isn't what I'm making this video about. But basically, the dart itself is 1 inch in diameter. The bore of the tank barrel, however, is about 4.8 inches in diameter. That's about 120 millimeters. And the sabot are the 3 metal petals that wrap around the 1 inch diameter dart. So when the round is fired, the petals basically they peel away, and the dart can continue towards the target, traveling at Mach obscene. I'd like to point out that sabot can travel 2 miles in 2 seconds. Now, both APFSDS and APDS work the same way. They both have sabot. The only difference is that APFSDS is fin stabilized, APDS is not. So, the Rarden has one of the two. I can't remember which. But I bring that up because I suspect the penetration figures are going to be relatively high. Possibly similar to something like the AP on the AMPV, which I kind of wish the name was changed to APFSDS instead of what I assume is Armor Piercing Incendiary. But, okay. And we do also appear to have cage armor. Now, one thing that I think is kind of interesting is this optic right here. Oh, excuse me. And I don't know, but I'd be kind of interested to see if the vehicle has a laser. Next, we have the Spartan. Now, here's the thing. It says here, another variant of the CVRT family acquired from the UK. The slighted vehicle is capable of transporting a recon squad. Upgrade options allow it to be fitted with a remote control turret with a heavy machine gun, an automatic grenade launcher, or even a Spike LR top attack ATGM. I thought this box was a camera. I did not realize it was an ATGM. Okay, so this is kind of... where is U.S. transports? What would be a good... analog. Honestly, the only thing that would come to mind would be this thing. If you want to do something like that. That would be an analog. Because the only other thing that actually carries Javelin in this lineup is this. And the only way you can actually fit it with Javelin is if you fit it with this thing. And that 30mm... that Bushmaster 2 is a bit of a far cry from a M2 Browning or a Mark 19. So I'm assuming you're going to be looking at something kind of like this, basically, or with the same weapons, the same weapon, or the same RWS, or a similar RWS like this. And again, we have the option for cage armor. Then again, having an ATGM might not necessarily be good if you're just wanting to use it as a basic transport. And then we have this thing, the TGB 1111, with a old Swedish vehicle acquired by Estonia. It can be equipped as a tank hunter with either a 90mm recoilless rifle or with an RBS 56 ATGM, which I think I mentioned in the last video. If memory serves, was actually the first top attack ATGM. While this ATGM has limited range, its overflight top attack warhead allows it to bypass the front armor of tanks to hit their more vulnerable roof armor. You know, with these mentions of top attack ATGMs, I can already hear all the people whining about, oh, top attack ATGMs, oh, they're so broken. Yes, I've been browsing the Discord recently. Can't you tell? Anyway, I do want to point out something interesting with this image that I can't zoom in, because in this image with the ATGM, you get a guy with a MMG in the passenger seat, but with the recoilless rifle, you don't have anybody in the passenger seat. And I wonder if, because presumably the recoilless rifle, I mean, I imagine this is going to operate very similar to, where is it? To this thing. I imagine it's going to operate very similar to this, where you basically have one round for use against armor and another round for use against infantry. So, also, I'm assuming, hang on, 75, where is the BMP-1? Okay, well, this is 73 millimeters with 400 millimeters of pen. This is also, no, not that. This is also 73 millimeters, I believe, with about 300 millimeters of pen. So if we're talking about a 90 millimeter recoilless rifle, we might be looking at around 600 meters of pen. But anyway, so it looks like what I was trying to get at was it looks like the option to upgrade to what's it called, RBS? Yeah, the RBS. The ATGM is going to give us a GMPG as well, because presumably you don't have any anti-infantry options. Whereas with the recoilless rifle, you would presumably have an HE round that you could fire from it, much like this thing does. And then we have this thing, which the developers referred to as the Land Rover Defender before, and they're calling it something else here, which I'm not even going to try and pronounce. I mean, the first word is wolf, but I'm not going to try and pronounce the other thing. Rugged British-made 4x4 vehicle transports recon infantry faster than any other, ensuring they reach the contested areas ahead of the enemy. It's equipped with a medium and heavy machine gun that can be swapped for an automatic grenade launcher. Okay, when they say faster than any other, do they just mean that in a general sense to emphasize its speed? So presumably saying that it's going to be roughly on the same, that it's going to be roughly the same speed as something like the Sarmat, which comes in at 130, the UAZ, which also comes in at 130, or I think a better example would be something like the RSOV, which comes in at 130 and can carry troops, although you can make an argument for the Flyer GMV as well, which only comes in at 120 but can also carry troops. So are they saying that as a means of emphasizing the vehicle's speed? How much is this like? Oh, that also moves at 130, but that, again, that doesn't carry troops. Are they saying that to emphasize the vehicle's speed? Or is it literally actually going to be the fastest vehicle in the game? Because there is a faster vehicle in the game, and it's the basic SUV. And that can actually travel at 140 kilometers an hour. So I'm assuming this thing's only going to go at 130, and it's not actually going to be faster. Combat recon. These units benefit from superior stealth and optics, but also represent a meaningful threat with some considerable firepower. A versatile special forces unit from the, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that, the Great Jaeger Battalion. They are equipped for deep reconnaissance, direct action with HK-416s, a Mini-Me Mark III, which I believe is I think that's because the FN Mag, which is a 7.62mm medium machine gun, would later go on to basically form the basis for a lot of Western medium machine guns. It formed the basis of the M240, for example. I think the FN Mini-Me is like an FN Mag that's been made smaller. I can't remember if that's still chambered in 7.62. It says here it's chambered in 7.62, but I think there might be versions chambered in 5.56. I know the Israelis have their own version, the Negev, and 7, I believe, which I think is also chambered in 7.62, which is basically just like a FN mag that the Israelis have taken and basically made their own, in much the same way that the U.S. took the FN mag and made our own, and then called that the M240. Scar H, and a Carl Gustav, which is basically the same as the mods. Doesn't say the squad size, although one of these guys had a Carl Gustav. Was it these ones? Hang on, I still have these pictures on my phone. I could take a better look at it this way. Pictures. Yes, it does appear to be the ones in the middle that have the Carl Gustav. Okay. So I'm assuming that's something akin to the Moz. It's a 7-man team. I can't think of anything roughly similar to it. If we're talking about infantry, I don't know, maybe something like the RRC with their Moz. Because Force Recon is the only other option I could think of, but they only have AT-4s. And I don't think any Russian recon unit has a reload. Oh, well, no. There's some with the RPG-7s. Large 8-man team. I actually think this is the largest recon squad in the game. Anyway. So they have an AT-4. You then have the IST scouts. Estonian scouts, so that not to get mixed up with the ones in Striker Cav. The Estonian Scouts Battalion is a highly trained and well-equipped Raptor action force. In the game, the unit is outfitted with some delays Raptor adopted by Estonia, including the R-20 Rehi assault rifle, the R-20L DMR, the Negev NG-7, and the Spike SR-AT missile system. And they actually already had the Spike SR in-game. Yes. Spike SR short range differs significantly from the Spike LR variant in that it's a shoulder-fired, fire-and-forget missile designed to fill the gaps between unguided shoulder-fire rockets and longer-range anti-tank guided missiles, providing infantry with the effective short-range anti-armor capability. Now, here's the thing.
Signal clear. Receiving
I do not know what kind of guidance system I don't know what kind of guidance system the Spike SR has, but I think it's known as PLOS, PLOS, or predicted line of sight. And this is basically where the operator, they look at the target, which is presumably moving, they flip the system on, and then they track the target for a certain amount of time. If memory serves, for the NLAW, this was anywhere from at least 2, but no more than 12 seconds. And then the onboard guidance system, which basically the onboard computer, for lack of a better term, looks at the target moving, And then the operator, without actually having to move away from the target, just pulls the trigger. And the computer has told the missile, hey, make this adjustment in flight. But here's the thing about the predicted line of sight guidance method. It's not actually guided. In other words, or I say in other words, in layman's terms, the computer has just told the missile, make this maneuver as you fly, and you should hit the target. The missile, for all intents and purposes, has no idea what's going on around it. It's just doing what it's told, and it should hit the target. This doesn't necessarily mean that that it will hit the target. If, say, for some reason, the target slams on the brakes in between firing and the time the missile should get there, the missile, from my understanding of the predicted line of sight guidance method, will miss. In that instance, I'm not entirely sure why it needs to be fire and forget in the first place, and why you can't just use... Because the game automatically leads targets with something like a conventional AT-4. For all intents and purposes, there should be no difference between the way a conventional AT-4 works and the way this works. At least in-game. There's a massive breadth of distance. There's a massive difference in the way it works in real life, but in the game, there should be effectively no difference in the way it works, at least from my understanding of the Spike SR and the predicted line of sight guidance method. So, I'm not exactly saying it's bad. I'm just... It's interesting that they've decided to make it a fire and forget system. Also, it appears to be a disposable launcher, which is kind of interesting. And then you have the SUV. The Special Task Unit, or SUV, is a Latvian Special Forces unit. In the game, they are represented as a reconnaissance unit focused on anti-infantry. They're equipped with suppressed G36Ks, shotguns, RPG-6 multiple grenade launchers, which I wonder if that's going to be something like the M... Hang on. I wonder if that's going to be something like the M32s that the U.S. has. Because it's either going to be something like the M32, or, and this is going to sound dumb, or it's going to be something roughly akin to, where's Marine Corps? Marine Corps, infantry. So yeah, I wonder if it's going to be something akin to like this. Like what he's holding. Is there any guys holding an M32 up front? But there's only one dude It's just that guy holding one. Oh, okay, there's the other guy. But, so, presumably it's going to be something like that. Presumably. RGB6. Yes, I'm throwing this together, and I haven't actually looked up these weapon systems. I can do that now, and it's probably the smart thing to do, is to look this up. RGB6. I assume this is a rotary drum grenade launcher. RBG6. Okay. What's this unit? Latvian. So we need to go to the L's. Oh, there's an RG6, which is a Russian grenade launcher developed in the mid-90s. Okay. RBG6. There's an RGP-40. RBG6. Okay, I can't find any, Alright, well, after a very, very quick search, I can't find any distinctive returns for that. But it's probably a 6-round rotor grenade launcher, much like the Mark 32. Notably, however, these guys also have flashbangs, so this is presumably going to be a lot like Pararescue. For that matter, grab SOCOM, Recon, Pararescue. Pararescue does not get a Mark 32. Okay. So these guys also have flashbangs, making them effective force in close quarters. So you can use them as door kickers, basically. We then have infiltrators. These units have limited combat capabilities and can be rapidly overwhelmed, but they excel at infiltrating enemy lines and to provide valuable information. And this is basically your equivalent to like sniper teams. The Lithuanian Combat Diver Service, KNT, is a branch of Special Operations Forces specialized in amphibious warfare. So we have a U.S. amphibious recon unit as a counterpart to PDSS. This amphibious unit is armed with suppressed MP5s, can infiltrate through waterways and emerge in the back of unsuspecting enemies, providing valuable recon of enemy front and back lines. Are they only going to be armed with MP5s? I mean, to be fair, you don't want them shooting at anything. If these guys ever pull the trigger on their guns, something has gone sideways. Like, that's basically the mantra for any recon unit. Snipers, PDSS, anything like that. If they ever pull the trigger on their rifles, things have gone sideways. Honestly, it doesn't matter which option you pick for the PDSS. If these guys fire their guns, they're probably about to get vaporized. So, although one I can see the potential of using the grenade launcher option to basically try and hunt support equipment like artillery or air defenses. But again, if that's happening, you probably messed up. Because all things considered, it's probably better to just have the guy stay silent and then get an artillery piece to shell the area. Because at least then you haven't telegraphed to your opponent, hey, there's a recon team over here. Because if I'm playing, and granted I don't play multiplayer, but if I'm playing and I notice that, it looks like one of my air defense systems or artillery systems just got blown up by artillery, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a Grey Eagle loaded with Hellfires and Griffins, and I'm going to have this thing patrol my backline. This thing's then going to see these guys, and it's going to eat these guys. So even if they are just armed with MP5s, that's still not going to be a big deal, because the only thing that these guys offer, or I say the only thing, the best thing these guys offer is what they can see. That is far more important than anything they could shoot. Even if you gave them like the best weapons in the game, the important thing is going to be what they see rather than what they shoot. And then we have snipers. This Estonian sniper team operates in Paris, consisting of a shooter equipped with a Hecate 2 heavy sniper rifle. So I'm assuming we're talking about something like 50 caliber or in that same range. And a spotter carrying an R20L 7.62mm DMR version of the R20, which allows them to support this sniper while maintaining firepower of their own. So, I mean, at that point, you're basically just talking... No. You're basically just talking like this. Or this. It's just one of these. Although having a large caliber rifle like that, I'm not sure if it's going to be like full on 50 cal. Like taking something like the ASVK. Instead, it might be something like this thing. The T5000. Also, that's 338 Lapua. I need to remember that. Where is Green Berets, for that matter? Mark 22 is also chambered in 338. Okay. Rangers, the Mark 210 is chambered in 300 Winchester Magnum. Mark 210 is also chambered in 300 Winchester Magnum. The M48-5 is chambered in 7.62 by 51. That's chambered in 7.62 by 54R. Lapua Magnum. Or 308 Winchester. 308 Winchester, which is 308 Winchester. That's basically 7.62 by 51. Not quite, but basically. Three-man Latvian sniper team armed with an Accuracy International AXMC chambered in 338 Lapua. A powerful and highly accurate cartridge designed for engaging targets at extreme ranges. The second sniper carries an Accuracy International Arctic Warfare chambered in 7.62, providing reliable precision at medium to long distance. The third team member provides security with a G36 fitted with an underbarrel grenade launcher. So what I'm assuming is 5.56 is so basically something very similar to the Mark 22 in performance, but otherwise similar to the airborne snipers. So basically, imagine like the airborne snipers, but with the Mark 22 ASR rather than the M107 or the M210. Okay. Infantry. And we have this. Look, I'm not going to try and pronounce these names, and I don't mean that, and I don't want that to be disrespectful to the Baltic states, but I struggle with English enough as is, and that's my first language. So if I try, I'm just going to butcher horribly. This Estonian infantry 8-man squad is equipped with R20s, M203s, and MG3 machine gun, which is basically a version of the MG42, yes, the one from World War II, chambered in 7.62 by 51 rather than 7.92. So and it also includes the hilariously high rate of fire of the original MG42. So I wonder if that rate of fire is going to factor in. Galat 7.62mm DMR, derived from the Galil, and a Spike SR. They're best utilized at mid-range because the Spike has a minimum arming distance superior to unguided RPGs. I think they mean greater than unguided RPGs. One thing about the MG3, because okay, so you technically had 3 versions of it. You had the MG3, which was basically just like an MG42 that was chambered in 7.60 by 51. You then had the the MG4, which was basically just an MG3 but chambered in 5.56, if memory serves. And then you had, okay, so yeah, that tracks. And then you had a And then you had the MG5, which I think was a 7.62 millimeter derivative of the it was yet another derivative of, if memory serves, the FN mag. Okay, yeah. So that tracks. The within a minimum arming distance of 100 meters. The Lithuanian Iron Wolf squad, with a well-rounded 8-man unit equipped with G36 rifles and grenade launchers, supported by KSP-58B and an FN Scar H precision rifle. Also carries a Carl Gustaf Mark III, which is probably going to be similar to the Maus. For anti-armor, this loadout allows the unit to remain flexible and capable across a wide range of combat situations. Again, it's 8-man. Latvian 8-man infantry squad is equipped with G36s and grenade launchers like their Lithuanian counterparts, but use mini-me light machine guns and AT-4s as force multipliers. They are suited for short-range engagements. Okay. And then we have volunteer forces. The Estonian Defense League is a voluntary national defense organization. It's represented by smaller 5-man squads equipped with reserve issue weaponry, Galil rifles, and Negev NG5 light machine guns, and B300 rocket launchers firing high explosive anti-personnel rockets, which is interesting to say the least.
My eye sees all.
Go away. And I'm comparing this to the units that are already in the game because I think, A, I think it's an interesting comparison to make, and B, I'm genuinely interested to see how things differ. I don't think this one is actually represented in game. Nope, it is. G36, M249 Para. Okay, so they're using some stand-ins. FN Mag, MG3.
Move your asses, maggots!
Just with basic marking.
Infantry good to go.
And yes, that is chambered in 7.62. Okay. The Mark III Maus looks like it's similar to the Raws, because the M3, because I think it's the M4 Maus with the 600 meter range and the 600 pen, like what you get on Ranger Maus. I don't think any of the units get that version of the Maus. Okay. Volunteer forces, Galil, Negev NG5, B300. These guys I don't think are represented. No. I mean, there is one way I can try it out. Or I can see, rather. But I'm not sure they're actually in the game yet. Copy. Up there. Edit. Anyway. And then the KASP, Lithuanian National Defense Volunteer Forces, equipped with G36s and M72A2 laws. Although this older anti-tank rocket is no longer effective against modern tanks, it can still damage lighter vehicles. I remember I did something similar to this in the last video, but I can't remember what units appear. What is that? K-A-I-T. Okay, so if I punch in K-A-I-T, that's the only thing that shows up. Alright. And I think that's the same. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the same. And then you have these guys. Latvia National Guard, represented by a 5-man squad equipped with older G3s, HK-79s, MG3 machine guns, and a Carl Gustaf M2. I wonder if that's kind of different stats from the M3. Well, the G3 rifles are older systems. They offer superior range compared to more modern rifles with smaller calibers. They are chambered in 7.62. So that could be interesting as like a standoff unit. And then we have Special Forces units. The Estonian Special Forces consists of elite soldiers who regularly participate in foreign deployments along the U.S. Special Operations Forces, but they also stand ready to fight in a high-intensity conflict closer to home. In this game, they're represented by a 9-man squad equipped with R-20S carbines, M203s, MG4s, which I think is, again, I think that's the 5.56 version of the MG3, and C90 CRBK dual-purpose rocket launchers able to take down both infantry and armored vehicles. C90 CRBK. Let me just punch in C90 real quick and see if that gives me any search results. C90. Other uses. C90CR, a rocket launcher. 90mm, 3.5-inch explodable shoulder-fired, one-man operated RPG. Blah, blah, blah. Developed in Spain, 1990. Tandem HE. Variants. CRBK. The C90 CRBK has a tandem warhead precursor for anti-bunker / building fortifications. The warhead pierces the walls and goes through the wall before it explodes inside the interior. Yay! So that's like a... Oh, what's the term used with the AT-4? Oh, there was some fancy marketing term that the AT-4 used. It was like post-penetration effects or anyway, I can't remember it. And then we have these guys as well. Lithuanian Green Boys, a 9-man squad specialized in CQB. Armed with suppressed HK-416s and mini-me light machine guns, shotguns, the M72A10, which is the same launcher the Rangers have, and flashbangs. They are designed to excel, and they're designed and excel in rapidly clearing buildings. So this is much like SOCOM in that we have 2 units with flashbangs in the same specialization. Okay. Anti-tank teams, Milan. The Milan is an old French-made ATGM with limited range but a lot of punches. It can pierce up to 1,000 millimeters of armor, which actually makes it the highest that any US or Allied unit can have. This team uses 2 launchers that wants to compensate for the lower reliability of this weapon. I assume... I mean, I know the development team isn't from the US, so English isn't their first language. So I assume that all of this has been translated, which is kind of like the assumption up here when I highlighted the Spike has a minimum arming distance superior to the unguided RPGs. Superior, I think what they mean here is that longer, greater than unguided RPGs. It's not superior, because superior is like better. When you hear the term superior, you think better. And while you can argue that the terms better, superior, and greater can all be used as synonyms, it's not... It all depends on use. So, what I assume they mean down here is when it says lower reliability, that might be a better word might be something like lower capability of the weapon, because the game doesn't include a reliability function. So 2 launchers can pierce up to 1,000 millimeters of armor, and I'm assuming the range is relatively short, something akin to the faggot or the melts. Which I made the mistake in my last video. Actually, I referred to the Russian ATGM, the 9M111. I called the when I said faggot, I was referring to its NATO reporting name, or at least I thought that was its NATO reporting name. I was getting it mixed up with the NATO reporting name for the MiG-15. The NATO reporting name is actually AT-4 Spiral, I believe. I can't quite remember. But the Russian name for it is the 9M111 Faggot. F-A-G-O-T. And then we have a Lithuanian Javelin team. American Javelin Top Attack ATGM has been purchased by both Estonia and Lithuania, but in larger quantities by the latter, so we have represented the infantry squad carrying them as a Lithuanian unit in the game. This is a 4-man team with a single launcher carrying 6 missiles. So, like a mini weapons squad then, I assume. 4-man, 6 missiles. So yeah, like a basically like a mini weapon squad, just without the M240. The Spike LR is fire and forget top attack ATGM, similar to the Javelin, but with more range, making this Latvian. Oh, it's raining. Making this Latvian 4-man team a deadly threat to any armored vehicles, including tanks with a large radius. So it's basically it's Javelin but with more range. So is this going to be like the Javelin lightweight Clue version with a 1500 meter range or what? Anti-aircraft teams. Hang on, I'll be right back. Oh, that Mi-28 is having a bad day. Anyway, it's coming down buckets down there. Anyway. The Grom is a Polish-made equivalent to the Russian Igla acquired by Lithuania. This 4-man aircraft team carries 2 launchers to compensate for the lack of performance of this all-weapon system. So, kind of like a suckier version of Stinger teams, presumably? The Purun, or Perun, or however you want to... I'm just going to call it the Perun. And again, an Mi-8 having a very bad day. The Perun, or Purun... Look, you can either spell that P-E-R-U-N or P-I-O-R-U-N. They both refer to a Slavic deity on roughly the same level as Odin or Zeus, or at least the Slavic deity in the Slavic pantheon that sits on roughly the same level as Odin or Zeus. Alternatively, if you spell it P-E-R-U-N, you're going to find a very interesting YouTube channel. But I digress. Is an evolution of the Grom with better range and a more potent warhead. All 3 Baltic states have ordered this man-portable anti-aircraft missile, but since the other nations have alternatives, we have decided to consider it an Estonian unit in the game. And then we have RBS-70, and this one's kind of interesting. And yes, I did look through this before the, before making this video. Also, we have another Mi-8 variant. One that appears to be having a less bad day, but seeing as it's popping flares, I'm not entirely sure it's going to stay that way. The Swedish Robot System 70, acquired by Latvia as a short-range anti-aircraft system required to be dismounted when transported. I think they mean disassembled. It has more range than shoulder-fired rockets, but also requires the whole team to be stationary to become operational. So, in effect, this is not a MANPADS. MANPAD stands for Man-Portable Air Defense Systems. The Igla, the Verba, the Stinger, the Grom, the Purun, I believe it's pronounced using that spelling. These are all man-portable air defense systems, MANPADS. Basically shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles. This is not... correction. This is a man-portable air defense system, but it's not a shoulder-fired surface-to-air missile system. There's a distinct difference there, which I find very interesting. And then we have heavy weapons teams. We have a basic M2 Browning team. A team with 2 Browning heavy machine guns serviced by a crew of 4. 2. Has this been updated since I looked at it an hour ago? They're great fire support. Well, I'll know it's been updated when we get down to support, and I'll explain why when we get there. Their great fire support against infantry and light vehicles can also represent a serious threat to helicopters flying too close. And then we have some GMGs, a pair of German-made GMG automatic grenade launchers. Not technically Mark 19 derivatives, although it probably bears a striking semblance to the Mark 19. Provided great fire support against infantry and light vehicles. Their important volume of fire is also useful to stress tanks, even if they cannot damage them. I have seen kill feeds of someone managing to kill a T-15 with a Mark 19 grenade launcher, and it's hilarious. And with the M2 plus the GMG, a mix of an M2 and a GMG for those who cannot decide between the two. So presumably you just have 3 4-man squads, one with 2 M2 Brownings, one with 2 grenade launchers, and then one with a Browning, an M2 Browning, and a grenade launcher. Okay. And then we have vehicles. We have infantry carrying vehicles, the CV-90-35. The Swedish-made CV-90 is one of the best infantry fighting vehicle platforms. Well-armored, compact, mobile, powerful. The main weapon is a 35mm Bushmaster 3 chain gun, and the vehicle can be upgraded with a Mark IV standard to the Mark IV standard, adding Spike LR missiles and an Iron Fist active protection system. Note the difference in the turret. It's also possible to upgrade the armor with ceramic plates to make it resilient to Russian 30mm autocannons from the front, a great option to bring troops in the front line to provide heavy fire support. So does that mean we're talking like a 30mm, or not 30mm, but 120mm frontal kinetic armor? Don't know. Would be very interested to find out more about that. And then we have the Vilkas. The Vilkas, or Wolf, is the name given to the Lithuanian army by the Lithuanian is the name given by the Lithuanian army to their newly acquired Boxer armored fighting vehicles. The variant is armed with a 30mm Bushmaster 2 chain gun and Spike LR missiles. It's also possible to upgrade it with an active protection system called Strike Shield. That might be the name of the APS system that I was thinking of. It's a German APS. I can't remember. I thought it was an acronym, like a 4-letter acronym. But I guess I was wrong. I guess it's just called Strike Shield. Also, I wonder if they're going to carry any reloads or if it's just going to be 2 missiles. The M113. This, I mean, honestly, it's an M113. If you're familiar with the one in Armor Brigade, I assume this is going to be I assume this isn't going to be any different. The venerable American-made armored personnel carriers were bought by Lithuania from Germany in the early 2000s after being modernized and are still in service. They have a seating capacity of 10, which is more than enough for a mechanized squad and allows to carry 2 squads of volunteers/reservists at once. The armor can be upgraded with a cage to increase the resilience against RPGs, and the M2 HMG can be swapped out for a GMG automatic grenade launcher. Speaking of reservists, I noticed the Russians have a reserve infantry squad. That's only 7-man. They have a PKP and smoke grenades, but they don't have any sort of anti-armor weaponry. So I wonder if we're going to get something like that in a Russian spec, presumably. The XA-180, which I believe I mistakenly thought was like a German Fuchs. When in like the first mission I played, I mistakenly thought that was a German Fuchs, and it made myself look incredibly dumb. Or I made myself look incredibly dumb. This Finnish-made amphibious armored personnel carrier is simple and reliable, can transport up to 10 soldiers at speeds of 100 kilometers an hour on road. The protection can be increased with extra armor plates and smoke pods at the cost of the amphibious capabilities. The heavy machine gun can be swapped out for an automatic grenade launcher too. Okay, that's interesting because it says 10. Meanwhile, if we go over here to vehicle, the XA-180 has a seating of 16. It's rather lightly armored, though, and doesn't have any smoke. So that's very interesting. Although I believe a lot of these infantry squads, 5-man, 8-man, 9-man, 5-man, 4-man, 6-man, 4-man, 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 8-man. Okay. And then we have combat vehicle. Hang on.
All things shall be revealed.
Go away. You're not even spewing anything. Leopard 2A8. The German-made Leopard 2A8 is the latest iteration of this legendary tank. I think it might be Legendary Tank Series would be a better way to phrase that. This steel beast can weigh up to 70 tons when fully upgraded. I wonder if they mean metric tons or standard tons. But if they mean standard tons, as in 2,000 pounds, then it'd be closer to like 66 to 67 metric tons. The significant weight of the platform is starting to hinder its mobility as the engine has not been upgraded since the initial weight was around 55 tons. So I wonder if we're going to have a situation like on the Tusk kits where if you want to add on extra armor, it's going to make the vehicle slower. Which is going to be a pain, but I guess I can understand it. When it may lack up in mobility, it makes up for an outstanding frontal armor and can be upgraded with extra side armor or a trophy active protection system to intercept anti-tank rockets and missiles. I can't help but notice they use the word "or," and the trophy does not appear to be the same. Like, you don't appear to have the same side armor. Basically, I wonder if we're either going to have to pick between the add-on armor or the APS. And not have both in the same way that you can with the trophy. A remotely controlled HMG can also be installed for even more firepower. Alright, well, I think that might be not exactly pointless, but a bit redundant. It's probably going to be something like on the T90, where you have an option for a remote control cord, or you can swap the cord out for the or you could swap the remote control PKT out for the remote control cord. It's probably just going to be like an extra 5 or 10 points to get the M2 Browning, which might not be bad. I assume this is going to have a MG3 in it, and the M2 Browning might not be bad. But the obvious point of comparison is going to be this thing. So we'll see how this... This thing, interestingly enough, has 2 MG3s, and I assume, yeah, we have an AP, we have, not APS, we have an RWS there, and then we have the coaxial. This thing has very good armor, it's decently fast, it's decently mobile, it's got good rounds, all things considered. I mean, it has HE, for one, which is good on tanks. Honestly, if this thing was in the game as is without any sort of upgrade package, for 210 points, it would be broken. Like, it would be straight up broken. Because you're talking about firepower and armor protection that is easily equal to the SEP V2, and that's 250 points. So, yeah. I assume that the Leopard 2A8, which is probably going to have performance either equal or superior to this thing, is going to be at least 250 base. You're probably going to be able to get it up to like 350 once you tack all the upgrades on.
Mission is over. We return to the base.
And then the Type X, and this one, oh, I want to play with this one. The Estonian-made unmanned ground vehicle is the first ground drone introduced into the game. The absence of crew offers multiple advantages. First, it's immune to stress, meaning it will always fight at full capacity. It is light enough to be airdroppable, and it's compatible with many types of turrets armed with multiple weapons, including an M230, a Bushmaster 1, or Bushmaster 2, javelins, or spikes. So, presumably, we have an M230 and a javelin, a Bushmaster 1 with a pair of Spike LRs, and then a Bushmaster 2 turret with a Bushmaster 2 turret that's just as is with no ATGM. Okay. There it is. The main drawback of not having a crew is that the weapons cannot be reloaded, so whatever is contained in the primary magazine is all you get until you bring it back to a resupply point. This, honestly, is an interesting drawback, but it also raises some questions. Because you have one javelin. One javelin and maybe like 2 spikes. So you're not going to be destroying much. To be entirely honest, you're not, if I understand what they mean, you're not going to be doing much with that. Because one javelin, alright, like, what are you going to be able to knock out with one javelin? Anything that has more than 10 health, you're not going to be able to knock out. You're going to be able to knock out this thing. This thing. Nope. I don't think you're going to be able to knock out anything in this specialization. Where's the MTSM? No, you're not going to be able to knock that out. Okay, you can knock that out. You can knock that out. You aren't going to be able to knock any of these out. You can knock that out. That. Nope. 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 Definitely not. You could knock that out. You couldn't knock that out. Nope. 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 No. 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 Also, I'd like to point out this is the only Russian the only Russian SAM that can actually eat a harm. No. No. Yes. Definitely not. No. No, no, no. No, no. No, no, no. No, no, no. No, no. No, I don't think there's anything you could knock out in this specialization. Yeah, no. So, only having one missile is a very interesting drawback. There's basically nothing that you could legitimately knock out with a single missile. You're gonna have to use the cannon. I, however, also assume that these things are gonna be kind of cheap. The G-Wagon, which again is very IFAV-like. Light 4x4 is exceptional in mobility on road compared to heavier armored vehicles. It's equipped with an anti-tank guided missile, either a Milan, a Mapats, which apparently is equivalent to the TOW, and a Spike LR. This unit is a great option for ambush enemy reinforcement columns or as a support armored engagement for a cheap price. And then we have, well, support. The M109A5, simple and reliable self-propelled howitzer used by Latvia, shooting high explosive smoke rounds. The M109A5, it's very similar to the A6 version used by the US, but has a lower ammunition carry capacity of 36 instead of 42. So basically, it's the M109A6. The K9 Thunder is a modern 155 self-propelled howitzer developed in Korea and purchased by Estonia. It combines long range with a good rate of fire thanks to assisted loading system. Standard or extended range munitions are available, including the guided volcano rounds. Okay, so I wonder what the range is going to be to because this thing has a 52 caliber gun barrel if memory serves. So are we looking at because presumably this is going to be a 3,800 meter range like the A6, like the A6 Paladin. Could this be like 4,000 meters base and then maybe 4,300 with the extended range ammunition? Or is it going to go full on Kolizia where it's like 4,200 with the base and then 4,500 with the extended? And if it's going to do that, why is this thing even here? Built in Germany and purchased by Lithuania, the self-propelled howitzer has one of the highest rates of fire in the world. It also carries 60 rounds, which is higher than most of its counterparts. So, I'm not entirely sure how these artillery systems are going to differ from each other. Granted, not having options isn't bad, but I'm not entirely sure. Well, I don't know. And I know I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I kind of wish I'd give this thing at least 60 millimeters of armor, or like armor it to the same level as something like the Strikers, at least, if not the armor it to the same level as armor it to the same level as this. Is there like an 80 armor? No. There's no 80 armor US armored vehicle, is there? That's something I'm going to have to go to the Russians for something like the BMP-3, or the BMP-2 rather. BMP-1. But give it like 60 to 80 millimeters of frontal armor and the appropriate side and rear armor, mainly for the sake of having some extra protect, that and a little bit more health, like maybe 14, for the sake of having extra protection against things like artillery, or maybe even 16, because the big thing about the PCH-2000 is that it weighs like 55 tons. And it's actually a pretty heavily armored howitzer. I know I've mentioned that before, but I'll say it again because I think that'd be very interesting to see. And then we have the M113, which is basically just 120mm mortar and a M113 chassis. 120mm mortar mounted on the back of an M113, able to shoot high explosive or smoke rounds. The armor of the vehicle can be upgraded with cage armor, and a self-defense machine gun or grenade launcher can be added. So it's basically the, where is it? Where is it? No. This. I'm blind. It's basically this. It's just like a reskinned version of this. At least I would assume. Just like a reskinned version of this that you can do that with. And then you have an option for like these. Presumably you wouldn't have the M240 option. You might not have the option to add smoke onto the Baltic Battalion version, because I don't see. Well, okay, you've got a bank of what appears to be smoke launchers over here, so you might still have that option, or it might just come with that option natively. And presumably you'll have an option like here where you can pick between mostly HE and mostly smoke. And then we have SAMs, the Iris-T, a medium-range air defense system carrying 4 or 8 vertically launched missiles made in Germany, recently purchased by all 3 Baltic countries. This is very interesting, because in the last video I speculated whether or not it's going to start out at like 3,200 meter range and then go up to like 3,600 meter range with an upgrade. And apparently they're not doing that. They're just doing the sort of the Pack 3 MSE kind of thing, where you can go pick either between 4 missiles or 8 missiles. But I can't help but notice that these boxes are rather small. So I'm still expecting a 3,200 meter range. Heck, it may even be as low as 3,000 meters. Which, I mean, wouldn't necessarily be bad. The idea of a light and presumably cheap SAM would be nice. I mean, I know I've said that. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Having a light and cheap SAM would be nice for the US, and I know I've suggested just putting a NASAMS launcher on a MTV chassis. One of the reasons why I want that isn't necessarily because it's cheap, but also because it's light, so you can presumably sling load it underneath a helicopter. That's what the Slam Ram was originally, and I kind of want that capability. I mean, ideally, you'd be able to push the Slam Ram out the back of a perfectly good aircraft. That would be fun. NASAMS. This Norwegian surface-to-air missile system, purchased by Lithuania, consists of 6 missile pods mounted on the back of a truck. Each pod can carry an AIM-9 Sidewinder or an AIM-120 AMRAAM. I wonder if you'll. I wonder how you'll be able to customize these. Presumably not each pod individually. Maybe in the upper half or the lower half. But this is presumably going to be a lot like the Slam Ram. Or maybe you'll be able to customize them for like center, left, and right. Here we go. The Unimog, the ZU-23 of the Minstrel. This short-range anti-aircraft unit can be fitted with either a twin 23mm cannon or a Minstrel missile launcher. The Minstrel is a French-made short-range anti-aircraft missile, about twice the weight of a man-pads like Stinger or Igla. It has more range and punch, but due to the weight, it is impossible to be shoulder-launched. I'd like to know exactly how much range and punch, but I suppose we'll find out soon enough. Oh, that's not an air conditioner. I'm dumb. Like, on all these Unimog variants, I was seeing this, and I thought there was like a fan in here, and I was sitting there thinking, is that some sort of air conditioner? No, it's a pintle mount for a machine gun. Also, I have no idea what this is. It might be a radar. No idea. Supplies, the E-13TP. This truck dedicated to supply transport can carry up to 15 tons, which is kind of interesting because I would have guessed like 12, but it looks like it is carrying the same sort of 20-foot shipping container that the M1075 and the LVSR carry, so I don't suppose it's a big deal. It's well armored and has a self-defense MMG, and a self-defense MMG is available on the roof of the cabin. So I wonder if that means it has like the sort of... Well, I wonder if it means it has an armor package baked in, if they mean by that. And they accidentally used the wrong image. I think this is just supposed to be the basic Unimog. And this is what I was saying when I asked if they had updated this, because I assumed they would have replaced this with the image of the Unimog that we're supposed to get. It's no big deal though. Smaller multi-purpose truck that can carry up to 16 soldiers or 3 tons of supplies. Oh, that's a whole lot less than the Unimog in the than the one that's currently in the game for the Baltic units. Because I mean, honestly, the Unimog that's currently in the game is just a copy of the MTV. It's got all the same stats as the MTV. And I know that because originally the MTV only had 16 seats. And now it has 18. So it's just a copy of the MTV prior to getting the seats upgraded. Personally, I kind of like to see that go up to 5 tons. But I don't suppose it's that big of a deal. It is a light transport truck. Helicopters. And we have 2 different types. The AS-365. Fast and agile helicopter with limited carrying capacity. 10 soldiers can be transported or 1.5 tons of cargo. It can be fitted with 20mm gun pods and or 70mm rockets. So again, would like to know if you... Well, firstly, I'd like to see the stats for the 20mm autocannon. That looks interesting. But I'd also like to know if you upgrade either one... Like, if you can upgrade one side or the other. Presumably you can, much like the OH-58 or the AH-6. And then we have the UH-60M. This American helicopter has been purchased by both Latvia and Lithuania. It carries up to 13 soldiers or 4 tons of cargo. The door weapons can either be an FN MAG MMG or a GMG automatic grenade launcher. Which is hilarious. I'm not going to lie, and I will most definitely enjoy using that. Like, I remember I was saying I had a talk with someone on Discord a couple of days ago about adding different nations in the game, and I said that we didn't quite see eye to eye, and that's true. And I've had several conversations with. When I say several, I had like 2 on the Discord, and this one in particular, although this one was the much more intelligent one instead of. And I say much more intelligent because the person in question actually, like, engaged with me, which I thought was quite nice, instead of just saying, oh, that sucks. And one of their biggest reservations about making nations for like Germany or the UK or France or Spain or things like that, or Poland, would be that they're going to be copy pasting equipment, like 4, 5, 6 different versions of the same piece of equipment. And I countered that argument by saying that yes, they could copy paste it, but they could do things to make it sort of unique within that nation. And I used this example of the 40mm grenade launcher as an example of that, because I mean it's unique. The U.S. Blackhawk can't mount a Mark 19 out the door. So I wonder if the range is going to be limited. I don't know. And then we have planes. The basic L-39. This small trainer jet can be equipped with various bombs as well as 70mm rocket pods. And AIM-9s. Its slow speed doesn't allow it to attack frontline targets defended by SAMs, but it's very cheap and cost-effective to attack units trying to infiltrate your lines. So, presumably, we're talking about something very similar to like maybe the Yak-38 in cost. Can this thing mount rocket pods? No, it does not appear to be able to mount rocket pods. Okay, well, yeah, it can kind of mount rocket pods. So, kind of something like that, in that it's a very cheap little plane that you can call in and just have it do stuff. I guess another example would be something like the Harriers. If I wanted to take a Harrier and that's actually a point. Can I take one of these Harriers and just give it? That's like 180. That'd be 165 for 4 AMRAAMs. They don't have the 19 tube pods, do they? Well, that one doesn't have the hydropods. This one has hydropods. And it's not the 19 tube pods. I mean, this thing has the 19 tube hydropods. Something like that. But on a much more platform with much better performance, so I don't expect it's going to be like 300 points. Very cheap and cost-effective to attack units trying to infiltrate your lines. So, basically a light attack aircraft. And then we have the C-27J, and this does appear to be the C-27J and not the MC-27 or the AC-27 like I talked about. Honestly, I didn't think it was either going to be any of those two variants. It would have been fun if it was, but that was a pipe dream. This Italian cargo plane purchased by Lithuania carries less payload than a C-130, but is also more agile while being as fast. Up to 10 tons of cargo or 46 paratroopers can be carried. We'd like to sincerely thank our players for their support and interest in the project. We really appreciate your playing, sharing your impressions, and providing feedback. We carefully read your reviews, take your comments into account, and are constantly working to make the project even better. Thank you for being with us. Honestly, I'm just thankful that they're making a good game. Anyway, so this video, like I said, is probably going to come out on the Wednesday, and then when they actually release an overview of the live event, which presumably is going to involve things like answering the questions from the community or talking about the roadmap and what is planned for the future, that I'm probably going to push back to a Saturday. And also the release date for the DLC. Alternatively, if that Dev Diary or if that post comes out before Wednesday, what I might end up doing is just taking this and taking that and just tacking the two recordings together and then posting that on the Saturday or maybe the Wednesday. And then if I do post the combined recording on Saturday, I'll just post a playthrough of the casual version of We Own the Night on Wednesday. So, anyway, that's the plan. Okay, so I'm editing this video about the Baltic Battalion, the Dev Diary, and I had a thought. Mainly, if you look at all the infantry, there's a grand total of 23 infantry squads. Like, oh, excuse me. There's a grand total of 23 different 23 different entries on different infantry units. And I was thinking about that because, I mean, firstly, that's a lot. That's like, I think, twice as much as the highest we get. Actually, that's a point. Arsenal, armory, infantry, 9, 4, 8, 8, 9, 7, 5, 7, 4, 9. Okay, yeah. So it's like, it's a lot. And that got me thinking a bit, because considering we're talking that's like 2.5 times as many infantry units as is normal in a specialization, I wonder if instead of literally having 23 individual infantry units, if they're going to treat each one of these infantry units kind of like customization options. So I wonder if they're going to have, like, for example, if they're going to have a single combat recon unit, for lack of a better term, and you'll have the option of choosing between these guys, or these guys. So, because, and it may not necessarily work. Like, for example, with the infiltrators, I fully expect, if we try to apply that logic here, I expect this might be its own separate squad, and these might be their own separate squads because they have different numbers of personnel in them. Then again, these don't appear to have. None of these appear to have to have numbers attached to them, where it doesn't say how many people are in the squad. But you can apply the same logic potentially here, because all three of these are 8-man squads. And, and I think you could argue that the logic would also apply with the volunteer forces as well. 5-man. 9-man, 9-man. Both of these are 9-man. Carbines, M203s, machine guns. Okay. So this could potentially be like the standoff version, and this could be the CQC version. Potentially. Four-man. Doesn't say how many guys are in this one. 4-man. Doesn't say how many guys are in that one. That's a 4-man squad. I would assume that's a 4-man squad. And if you were just going with like one Mark 19 or one grenade launcher and one M2 Browning, then you could also still get away with a 4-man squad. So that might be what they do, which would be an interesting it'd be an interesting way of pulling it off. You can argue that it would be a bit radical, I guess, particularly if you're going to be, like, adjusting the number of infantry that's actually in a squad. So... like, for example, if we assume that this is one unit, that's 9 guys. If we assume that this is another unit, that's 8 guys. And if this is another unit, that's 6 guys. Wait, no. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, no, okay, no, that's 7. And that's 8. Alright, I'm dumb. Just don't mind me. So, you would presumably have a unit that would fluctuate from 30 health, and then 35 health, and then 40 health. I mean, that's not necessarily undoable, but it would be very different compared to the way the, well, I say very different. It would be a much more notable change compared to the way that current infantry customization works. Because the way current infantry customization works is you get infantry that have different weapons, maybe different armor values, view ranges, or abilities, but the amount of infantry in the squad and the squad's subsequent health never really change. So if they do that, I suppose that could be a... I suppose that's one way they could do it. And then if they do decide to basically pull the Baltic Battalion specialization apart to fill out several specializations in a Baltic States nation, they can give each unit more conventional loadouts. Like, for example, giving the different special forces teams more conventional CQC and standoff loadouts. For that matter, Latvian... Okay, so that's the Latvians with the flashbangs. And if we go down here, Estonians, and then that's the Lithuanians with the flashbangs. Okay. But I was thinking about it, particularly when it comes to things like the AT teams. That's the only way I could really see it make sense for something like the AT teams or the Manpads teams. Because when you think about it, okay, there are some units, like if we particularly just look at line infantry, there are some units that get a couple of AT weapons, like the VDV Cornet and the VDV Melts M. You can argue that these are some that get different AT units. And I guess you can argue that. Or the motorized with the basic melts, which is kind of crap, let's be honest. Or the Cornets. Or you can argue situations here like the TOW 2A and the Weapons Squad. There's a combination of dedicated anti-tank and Earth's 2 anti-armor units. But you don't see any specialization that has more than one manpads unit. In fact, most of them, or some of them, usually one in each nation, doesn't have any manpads whatsoever. So the closest you would get would be SOCOM with both pararescue and Ranger Stingers. Aside from that, you don't really see anything else. So that might be something that they end up doing, is instead of just giving us 23 infantry squads, which, for the sake of it, no. Seriously, if they gave us 23 separate infantry squads, the Baltic Battalion DLC would have more infantry squads than the Guards Tank Battalion has units. So anyway, I thought I'd just share that. I don't necessarily think that they're going to do that everywhere. Mainly because I don't think it would fit if they did it everywhere. For example, the divers. Like, if you were to just put all of the infiltrators under a single heading, okay, then that doesn't really make much sense, because you have a sniper team, and then very much not a sniper team. These three could all be used in largely the same way. The basic infantry can all be used in largely the same way. The reserve forces can all be used in largely the same way. The special forces can be used in largely the same way. And again, the AT teams and the manpads teams can all be used in largely the same way. And heck, even the fire support teams. If we pare this down, hang on. If we pare this down, what would we get? So, assuming that all three of the combat recon units are in the same, are just like customization options of the same specialization, then we've got 1, counting that as separate as 2, counting these two together as 3, 4, counting all three of the mainline infantry units, and then 5 for the volunteers, 6 for the special forces, 7 for the manpads, or the ATGMs, 8 for the manpads, and then 9 for the fire support teams. Okay. That would actually be on par with what you get with some infantry heavy specializations, like VDV and mechanized infantry. To be fair, if you're talking about recon only, well, you're on par with VDV, Coastal, and although you don't quite reach SOCOM. But if you're talking about infantry only, you're still looking at, like, well, what was it, 6, which is going to put you on par with VDV, motorized. You're not quite reaching mechs levels, but airborne, and you're actually gonna have more line infantry than SOCOM. And I know, like, unit number in a category, or the number of different units in a category don't determine what the don't determine what the point values that go towards it are, because I mean, I'd like to point out that Striker Cav and SOCOM have the same 1250 in their infantry tab, and yet SOCOM has like, or Striker Cav only has like 60% of the infantry compared to SOCOM. Or for that matter, SOCOM has 1250 infantry points. Airborne infantry only has like 750, and airborne infantry actually has one more infantry unit. So, that said, though, I'm still thinking that this is kind of supposed to be like an American version, or rather a westernized version of mechanized infantry. I can't help but think we're going to get something like that. Or maybe something similar to the original Mostostreliki concept, or how is it pronounced? Motostreliki. This word right here. I can't help but wonder if we're going to get something similar in concept to that, where you have a lot of infantry supported by a decent amount of support. Oh, excuse me. A decent amount of recon, and armor, and not much in air and helicopter. I think last time I compared it to Striker Cav. At least what I was thinking, I compared it to Striker Cav if you cut the aircraft tab in half and you gave 500 points to helicopters. So, I guess you can use that as an example. Then again, I would kind of be inclined to cut 250 points off support and put it in infantry. So, for that matter, what's the lowest helicopter tab in the game? I think it's naval infantry at like 500, right? 750, 500, yeah. Huh. Anyway, that's just what I wanted to talk about. I thought that was interesting, or I thought that idea was interesting, something that they could potentially do, and I figured I should share it. I'll tack this onto the main video now.